Navigating Tomorrow's Storms. Lessons from History's Ultimate Comeback Stories. Picture this. It's 1945, and you're standing in the middle of Berlin. Around you, nothing but rubble. 90% of the city center is destroyed. Children are starving in the streets. The infrastructure that took centuries to build has been obliterated in 6 years. Every expert, every economist, every political analyst is saying the same thing. Europe is finished. Recovery is impossible. The continent will remain a graveyard for generations. Now here's what nobody saw coming. Within 25 years, that same shattered continent would become the world's most prosperous region. That starving child in Berlin? They'd grow up in one of history's most dramatic economic miracles. But here's the real question that should keep you watching. What did they know that we've forgotten? Because right now in 2025, as we face our own unprecedented storms, we're about to rediscover something powerful. Let me take you to another moment of absolute devastation. Rwanda, April 1994. In 100 days, approximately 800,000 people were systematically murdered. The country's infrastructure was annihilated. Trust between communities completely shattered. The international community abandoned them. Survivors were left with nothing but trauma and ashes. Here's what the World Bank predicted. Rwanda would remain one of the poorest, most unstable nations on earth for at least 50 years. Reconciliation? Impossible. Economic recovery? A fantasy. But something unexpected happened instead. Today, Rwanda has one of Africa's fastest-growing economies, with GDP growth averaging 7 to 8% annually over the past 2 decades. Their life expectancy has doubled. They've achieved near-universal health care coverage. And here's the part that defies logic. They've become a model for post-conflict reconciliation that other nations study. So what's the pattern here? What connects post-war Europe and post-genocide Rwanda to the comeback story you need to hear? It's this. Rock bottom isn't a place. It's a moment of clarity. Think about South Korea in 1953. The Korean War had just ended. The country's per capita income was lower than Ghana's, lower than most of sub-Saharan Africa. They had no natural resources, no industrial base, and a population traumatized by 3 years of devastating conflict. American officials privately called it the basket case of Asia. 60 years later, South Korea is the world's 10th largest economy, a global leader in technology, entertainment, and innovation. How does a nation go from literally poorer than almost anywhere on Earth to producing Samsung, Hyundai, and BTE? The answer isn't what you think. And it's not about having the right resources or the right circumstances. Because here's what history actually teaches us about rock bottom. It's not about the depth of the fall. It's about what you do in that moment when there's nowhere left to fall. The pivot, December 1776. George Washington's Continental Army is dissolving. They're freezing, starving, and deserting by the dozens every day. The American Revolution is about to become a footnote in British history as that failed colonial uprising. Washington has maybe weeks, possibly just days, before he has no army left at all. Every military advisor tells him the same thing. Retreat. Survive the winter. Rebuild. That's the safe play, the obvious play. The play every reasonable commander would make. Instead, Washington does something that seems completely insane. On Christmas night, in the middle of a snowstorm, he loads his remaining men onto boats and crosses the Delaware River to attack a fortified Hessian position. It's suicidal on paper. His officers think he's lost his mind. But here's what Washington understood that his advisors didn't. Sometimes the safe choice is the most dangerous choice of all. The raid succeeds. The Continental Army captures over 900 Hessian soldiers without losing a single American in combat. More importantly, the psychological impact reverberates across the colonies. Enlistments surge. The revolution doesn't just survive, it transforms. Now, let's jump to 1997. Apple is 90 days from bankruptcy. Steve Jobs has just returned to a company he was fired from 12 years earlier. The board wants him to keep doing what they've been doing. Make more products, chase more markets, compete with Microsoft directly. Jobs does the opposite. He kills 70% of Apple's product line. Imagine that. Your company is dying, and you decide to make and sell less? Wall Street thinks he's committing corporate suicide. Within 3 years, Apple is profitable again. Within a decade, they'll release the iPhone and change human civilization. Here's the pattern you need to see. The strategic pivot isn't about having a brilliant plan. It's about having the courage to abandon what's not working, especially when everyone tells you to keep trying harder at the thing that's already failing. Look at Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, 1965. His country has just been expelled from Malaysia. Singapore has no natural resources, no military, no water supply of its own, and is surrounded by larger, hostile neighbors. The conventional wisdom? Align with a superpower, become dependent, survive as a client state. Lee rejects that entirely. Instead, he implements policies so strict, so demanding, so contrary to post-colonial nationalist movements that other Asian leaders call him a Western puppet. He prioritizes meritocracy over ethnic solidarity, English education over linguistic nationalism, foreign investment over economic self-sufficiency. The result? Singapore transforms from a malarial swamp into one of the world's wealthiest nations in a single generation. Per capita income today exceeds $65,000 higher than the United States. Resilience. Here's where the story gets harder, because the pivot is just the beginning. Viktor Frankl spent 3 years in Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz. He watched his family die. He endured conditions designed to strip away every shred of human dignity. And in that hell, he discovered something that would revolutionize psychology. Frankl noticed that survival wasn't determined by physical strength or youth. Some of the strongest prisoners gave up quickly. Some of the weakest endured. The difference? Those who survived had a reason to live beyond their circumstances, a why that transcended the immediate horror. After liberation, Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning, which has sold over 12 million copies. But here's the part that matters for you. Frankl didn't just survive, he used his experience to help millions of others survive their own storms. That's the difference between endurance and resilience. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Finland, 1939. The Soviet Union invades with a force 3 times larger. The world expects Finland to fall within weeks. Stalin certainly does. Instead, Finnish forces fight for 105 days in the brutal Winter War. They inflict staggering casualties on the Soviet army, using nothing but ingenuity, intimate knowledge of their terrain, and absolute refusal to surrender. Yes, they eventually cede territory, but they maintain their independence when every military analyst said it was impossible. Fast forward to the 1990s. The Soviet Union collapses, triggering a devastating depression in Finland. Their largest trading partner vanishes overnight. Unemployment hits nearly 20%. GDP drops by double digits. Finland doesn't just recover, they transform. They invest heavily in education and technology during the crisis. By 2000, they're consistently ranked as having the world's best education system. Nokia becomes a global tech giant. They build a social safety net that becomes a model for developed nations. That's resilience. Not just bouncing back, but bouncing forward into something better than before. Faith-driven vision. Winston Churchill becomes Prime Minister on May 10, 1940. Within days, France falls. Britain stands alone against Nazi Germany, which controls continental Europe. Invasion seems imminent. His own advisors suggest negotiating peace terms. Churchill's response? We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Here's what's fascinating. Churchill wasn't delivering a military strategy. He was selling a vision of the future so compelling that an entire nation chose years of bombing, rationing, and death over the alternative of submission. That's the power of faith-driven leadership. Not religious faith necessarily, but unshakable conviction in a better tomorrow. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison. 27 years. When he was finally released in 1990, South Africa was on the brink of civil war. The white minority government was weakening but desperate. The black majority was angry, armed, and ready for vengeance. Mandela could have led a revolution. Instead, he preached reconciliation. He wore a Springbok rugby jersey, a symbol of apartheid oppression, to the 1995 Rugby World Cup. He invited his former prison guards to his presidential inauguration. People thought he was naive. They thought he was betraying the cause. But Mandela understood something deeper. Revenge would feel satisfying for a moment, but it would destroy the nation for generations. Today, despite its ongoing challenges, South Africa avoided the civil war everyone predicted. That's because one man chose to inspire a shared vision rather than exploit justified anger. So here we are, 2025. You're watching this because you're navigating your own storm. Maybe it's personal, a career setback, a relationship collapse, a health crisis. Maybe it's watching the world seem to fracture around you, economic uncertainty, political division, environmental challenges. Here's what history actually teaches us. The severity of the crisis doesn't determine the outcome. Your response does. The strategic pivot. Are you doubling down on what's not working, or do you have the courage to try something radically different? The resilience factor. Are you just trying to survive until things go back to normal, or are you using this pressure to forge something stronger? The vision element. Are you leading with fear and anger, or are you selling a future worth building? Post-war Europe, post-genocide Rwanda, post-colonial Singapore, winter-besieged Finland. They all faced challenges that experts said were impossible to overcome. They proved the experts wrong not because they were lucky, but because they understood something fundamental. Rock bottom is simply the solid foundation on which you rebuild. Your storm is real. The challenges you face are legitimate, but you now know something powerful. The greatest comebacks in human history started from positions far worse than yours. They didn't have secret advantages. They had the same choice you have right now. So here's my question for you. What's your pivot going to be? Because tomorrow's storm is coming. whether you're ready or not, but now you know how to navigate it. The comment section is open. Tell me about your storm and what comeback you're building. Let's learn from each other, just like history taught us.